So one night I couldn't sleep, so I decided to just look for stuff on
an unclassified website for reselling clothes among other items.
as I tend to do, and after a few minutes I stumbled upon this t-shirt. I was immediately intrigued by this strange looking art and I had to know where it came from. Luckily, there was a URL on the t-shirt which read mrmohawk.com, so I went onto it and it was down, which I kind of expected since the shirt was apparently from 2007. Then I remembered that it was probably on the Internet Archive, and thankfully it was. So mrmohawk.com was home to an old webcomic created by Joe Morelli in 2006, with his friend Jeff Stade maintaining the website. The titular character was made in 2004 while Joe was drawing in art class, and he ended up making the first 4 comics that same year. The first iteration of the website contained other things such as news, character bios, and even some information about Joe himself. Like, did you know he's a supporter of the New York Mets? Well, probably not anymore. The website would gain an audience and be updated quite often, adding new comics almost daily and changing the layout a few times. There was also some merch made, which includes the National High 5 Day shirt, which inspired me to make this video. In 2008, the last comic would be added to the website and it would stop being updated because the two were going into high school at that point and had lost interest in the comic. Sometime between 2016 and 2019, Jeff would lose ownership of the Mr. Mohawk domain and it would be passed around various people until 2023, where it now takes you to a huge domains page. While I was looking at the website in the Internet Archive, I found that none of the comics themselves would show up, technically making them lost media. I really wanted to see what they were for some reason, so I decided to try and get in contact with either Jeff or Joe and asked if they had the comic in their possession. Sadly, I couldn't find anything about Joe online, and not even Jeff knew what he was up to now. The only thing I could find was an old blog featuring his art. Funnily enough, the email linked on there is joemorelli@mrmohawk.com, though sending an email to it won't work now. Thankfully, I managed to find Jeff's email address through an old website of his, and surprisingly he replied to me and would send me a zip containing the website and all of the comics a few days later. The only comic that's still lost is number 60, which will probably never be found again. As for the comic itself, I haven't read all of it, but it's nothing too special. It mainly revolves around Mr. Mohawk getting up to various antics with his friends. I will say though, it does have some charm, and it is nice seeing the art improve in the later comics, with the style becoming more defined and eventually transitioning from drawings on paper to digital art. Anyway, that's kind of all I have to say about Mr. Mohawk. Just an old webcomic that lasted for 2 years and didn't really go anywhere, and eventually faded into obscurity. Finally, this should go without saying, but please don't try to contact Jeff or Joe. They've moved on from Mr. Mohawk a long time ago and have their own private lives.